Hi, everybody. I am Dr. Christopher Barker. I'm a New Jersey licensed clinical psychologist, and welcome to Holding Space. Today, I want to talk about culture, relationships, and complex trauma. Because, complex trauma is kind of what I'm doing these days. Not being traumatized, but talking about it in anticipation of my upcoming book. And this is something that got inspired by a podcast that I was a guest on earlier today. And he was asking, and I really haven't been asked this question before, and it's actually something really worth discussing. What is culture and complex trauma? How do they intersect? Well, they can become surprisingly confusing in therapy, and that's a relationship between culture and complex trauma. People often ask questions like, is this my culture? Is this my family? And family to a certain extent is culture. Or is this trauma? What's causing this particular difficulty? The answer is often all three. One of the challenges is that culture teaches us how relationships are supposed to work. Trauma teaches us what we should expect from relationships. They aren't the same thing. Understanding the difference can help us make sense of experiences that otherwise feel impossible to untangle. So, culture is not the problem. Let's start with something important here. There's no such thing as a traumatized culture. I really shouldn't actually say that. There are some cultures that Holocaust, genocide, things like that, they can traumatize a culture. But in general, cultures develop different values for very good historical, social, and practical reasons. Some cultures value interdependence. Some value dependence. Independence. Some encourage emotional restraint. Some emphasize respect for authority. Others encourage questioning authority. None of those are inherently healthy or unhealthy. They're simply different ways of organizing relationships. So the problems begin when we assume that everyone's emotional experience should look exactly the same. And it just doesn't. Culture teaches us rules. From childhood, we learn things like how close family members should be, how much emotion is acceptable, whether disagreement is encouraged or avoided, whether children can or should express opinions. Children should be silent, they used to say, but that's not entirely true. Whether caring for parents is expected and who does most of the caretaking, how much privacy people deserve. That's another cultural value. How decisions are made and who makes them. These become our normal. Most of us never stop to think about them because we've never known anything else. Think about all the things that you're taught that somebody says, well, why do you do that? Well, that's the way I grew up. That's kind of just the way things are. But trauma changes the meaning. Complex trauma doesn't necessarily change the rules. It changes what the rules mean. Imagine two people raised in exactly the same cultural environment, and I work with a couple that's like this now. Both believe that family loyalty is important. One experiences warmth, consistency, and emotional safety. The other experiences criticism, unpredictability, or emotional neglect. They may both remain deeply committed to their family, but internally they experience something completely different. For one person, loyalty feels like connection. For the other, loyalty may feel like fear, obligation, or the constant need to avoid disappointing someone. This is what we talk about when we talk about overgiving and burnout. It's not often that we're just so generous of heart. It's just that we're trying to cement our place. From the outside, the behavior may look identical, but inside they're living in entirely different emotional worlds. Where therapy sometimes gets it wrong is that we can assume that every family expectation is pathological. It isn't. Another mistake is assuming that every family expectation is simply cultural. It isn't. Therapy requires curiosity. Instead of asking, is this cultural? We might ask, how does this relationship feel to you? Do you feel respected? Do you feel like you have choices? Can you disagree safely? Can you say no? Can relationships survive conflict? These questions often tell us far more than simply knowing someone's cultural background. You can understand a cultural background, but that person within their cultural surround may be entirely different. So the difference between obligation and connection came up actually during that podcast. And this is one idea that I return to a lot, is that behavior alone doesn't tell us very much. Take caring for elderly parents. In some cultures, this is expected, and it's pretty clearly defined who's going to be doing the caretaking. In others, it isn't. The behavior isn't the important part, the experience is. Does caring arise from love? From gratitude? From mutual respect? Or does it come from fear? Guilt? The belief that saying no would destroy the relationship? Two people can perform exactly the same action for a completely different emotional reason. Where does relational time fit? Okay, well, this is where my work on relational time comes in, because cultural influences how relationships are organized. Trauma influences how relationships are experienced over time. Healthy relationships have continuity. One disagreement doesn't erase years of trust. One misunderstanding doesn't automatically mean the relationship has failed. But when complex trauma is present, that continuity can begin to disappear. The present moment starts carrying enormous emotional weight. A disagreement feels permanent. A disappointed look feels like rejection. A delayed reply means abandonment. Oh my God, what did I do? They're not responding to me. The person isn't simply reacting to today's interaction. Their nervous system is responding as though the future has already been decided. Think about that for a moment. That's what I mean by a disruption of relational time. The past is so heavily influenced by trauma that anxiety results, hypervigilance results, dissociation can result, shame. But again, the past should not write the future. Things become even more interesting when relationships cross cultural boundaries. Partners may have completely different assumptions about closeness. One expects frequent contact. The other assumes independence. One believes direct disagreement is respectful. The other believes it's rude. Neither is necessarily wrong. They're both simply following different relational maps. Now imagine one or both partners also carry complex trauma. Suddenly, ordinary cultural misunderstandings become much more emotionally charged. A difference in communication style may be experienced as rejection. A request for space may be experienced as abandonment. The conversation quickly stops being about culture and it starts being about survival. So, curiosity before conclusions. One of the healthiest questions we can ask ourselves is this: what else could this mean? And I talk to people about this all the time, and taking the pause and being able to look at this from a different angle. And instead of being activated, I had to correct two people today on triggered because I hate that word. It's just so automatic, but activation is a heightened emotional state in which things can happen. But asking ourselves, what else could this mean? This question creates space and creates pathways. We're no longer just locked into one particular cause and effect. If then, in computer language. Maybe my partner's silence isn't rejection. Maybe their directness isn't criticism. Maybe their need for closeness isn't control. Maybe their independence isn't withdrawal. Trauma narrows possibilities. Healing expands them. So while culture gives us the language of relationships, complex trauma shapes the expectations that we bring into those relationships. Understanding both allows us to become more compassionate, not only toward people, but toward ourselves. Because very often the goal isn't to choose between culture and trauma. It's to understand how they interact. And once we understand that, we can begin responding to what's actually happening in our relationships instead of automatically reacting to what we learned to expect. We are no longer locked into a certain pattern. We're no longer seeing people as the enemy. We're no longer blaming culture. We're understanding what it's all about. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for holding space for me. And we'll be back with you soon. In the meantime, continue holding space for each other.